hour, so let's keep it going. I did talk to Linda and I heard a funny story about someone who had all of their editing done and thought it was finished, and then they published it, and none of the changes had actually been made. So you do need to get. That's one of the reasons I said, even if I said you want as many eyes on that final manuscript as you can, that's something that would have solved that problem probably, because what you want to do is you're always going to have something that needs fixed. You remember that 0.3% mistake. Something will sneak through. There's always going to be changes, but we'll talk about how you can always upload a fix. So don't let that, you don't have to work. You want it to be as perfect as possible, but don't let that stop you from getting published, okay? You're doing this. There's going to be, most people are going to miss most things, but most importantly, just get as many eyes on it as you can, and they'll catch all the stuff that most people will catch. One thing I did want to mention is, as we go through this process, I never want to hear about anyone getting taken advantage of, and hearing about, as self-publishing has become more normalized, that's probably going to be something that is both more prevalent, but hopefully easier to avoid. The two people I've worked with locally for editing that I have no problem recommending is one, Catherine York. She's here from Amarillo. She has a website I'll share through the things, critiquemynovel.com. I was thrilled with the work that she gave me. I would strongly recommend her. And I also worked with Jonathan Baker here locally, and I strongly recommend him as well. So if we can all work together, we can always share. Never be afraid to ask another writer here at THBW if they have someone they recommend for one of these things. Yes?
I hope I'm not jumping the gun. You may get into this, but my sister's also writing a book down in Dallas.
Right.
So we're corresponding. And she said that she had hired an editor to work on her book, and then the editor gave it back and said, "You're not ready yet."
Okay. So, and you know what? That's nicer than charging.
Yeah.
But yeah, because you want, before you take it to an editor, and sorry, all these things I should have mentioned. When you're working with beta readers, things like that, you want to go through several drafts before you hire someone to do your editing. You want to, and that's part of that is going to be your critique. Part of that might even go, you might do beta readers before you go and pay an editor, because the less work that they have to do, the better it's going to be for everybody. So, yes, ma'am.
There's a contest by Insights. I got the name off the
Okay.
And I participated in it. There's a charge, $40. It's not.
Okay.
But what you glean out of it is you're sending 10,000 words to them, and they put like 5 editors
Oh, cool.
on my work, and they did on everybody's. And then they gave a critique, whether it was the right title, whether it was the right genre, whether
Right.
it was right. And it was, I don't know if any of y'all ever had that experience before, but it was very telling with the book I was working on. Help.
That's a good idea.
That's
That
Catherine's.
And that's Catherine, so critique my novel. Yes.
Even Insights.
Speaking on that, I did have, when I was doing my children's book, I had 6 different beta readers that I had go through it, and one of them was a child psychologist, one was a librarian for a children's library,
Yes.
and another was a master's in working with children and stuff. And I had them just read them, and I said, anything that you see that's bad, poor, written, grammatical, whatever it is, circle it, and go through that, and that helped tremendously knock out tons of things that had to be edited before it ever got finished.
The more help you can get,
And if you
especially
can
if it's
especially
help
if
that's
you can come up
trading
with
back and
people
forth.
that actually fit into the category that need to.
That makes a
get
lot of
those
sense.
Things that goes to.
That's really good advice, especially for things like children's books where I wouldn't be able to ask someone who's extremely busy otherwise to go through my 100,000 words. But a children's book especially, or a shorter work, or poetry, you can have people go through it, like child psychologists, things like that.
Yeah, mine was like a 30-minute read,
Exactly.
A lot of different
And you've got amazing feedback, and it was worth it to do.
People that were there.
Exactly. So never be afraid. You can always ask. The big ask is never a bad thing. Yes, ma'am.
I lived in Los Angeles years ago, and like we want people to read scripts and stuff.
Oh,
like
right.
but, and that was not a successful endeavor. Don't be impressed.
Okay.
But I thought about something the other day, and this is something some of us might do. Lots of times we're in a position where we know somebody who has expertise, but like us, they're so short of time. They'd like to help you, but
Right.
it's just going to be really hard. And I was thinking about, I thought, I think a good thing to do, if you know somebody like that, try to think of something or ask them something you could do
Like a
for
trade.
them.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
Barter a trade.
yeah,
bartering.
barter, say, it'd be something like, you want to give me your grocery list? And
Yeah.
I'll go buy
Hey, if it gets you to work, if it
But-
gets you to
but-
value and help, that's great.
It's not just helping them out or bartering a trade, but it kind of sets a time
That's also
for
helpful, yeah.
when they will do it. Like, can you read this while I go buy your
Help you
groceries?
out with this. That's
You
great.
know,
Yeah.
Can you read this while I do a thing for you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And it occurred to me that if I had thought of that years ago, I probably would have gotten more things read.
You could always make a book. You can make a book on that. It could be a self-help book. Would be
Yeah.
Can I get you groceries?
Yeah.
How to get people to do
But
stuff.
it doesn't have to be that. Like,
No,
when
it's great.
when I lived in Los Angeles, and I did work for a couple of movie companies, and I had skills that were valuable to
Right.
writers, and it wouldn't have had to have been groceries.
Yeah, it could have been quick. Yeah, just I scratch your back, you scratch my back.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but also if you can create this, create a time.
Yeah.
So, I will do what I'm gonna do at the same time
That's a good idea.
that you're reading for me.
Yeah.
Then that's not just a commitment from them to do it, but my best book is going to be know how is not important, know when is everything.
That's good. I think that'll work. That's a good subtitle. All right, so we're going to get through these other three things, and I want to be very clear. I know that there are many of you who have been doing this longer than I have, who have put out more books than I have, and if there's something you'd like to share when we get to that appropriate time, we'll do that. I'll let you know, oh wait, just wait a minute, we'll get to it, or go ahead and we'll get all that in, because there's a lot of knowledge in this room, there's a lot of experience, and I don't want to waste that or miss out on an opportunity hearing things like ISB and coupons, because that's very helpful. Let's go ahead and get into print formatting. This is $200 and up, but that would be for both print and ebook when I've usually seen that. You could pay more, you might be able to pay less, and there are also other options for doing it yourselves. This was something that I felt most comfortable with doing myself for my first book, and I'm very proud and happy with how it turned out. So if it's something that you feel comfortable doing, it's something worth experimenting with, because you can do it on a small scale with shorter work, and you can see, is this something that I feel comfortable doing for a full book? And we'll talk about the different things that go into it. Why are we going to start with the print layout? Well, first off, when you do the cover, you need to know things like the page dimensions and how many pages long the work is, so that you can use the, I've got it later, the template that you would get from CreateSpace in order to know how big your cover needs to be. So get the print out of the way to do that, and then why do the print before the ebook? Because, well, the ebook is simulating a book. So if you get everything done for the print book, it'll be ready to put into the ebook. Does that make sense? Yeah. For me, the way I've done both of mine is I did a rough draft of the interior to get an idea of how big the cover would be and what the dimensions would be, so I could get the cover guy on that. And then I went back and did the bones of the book afterward. So you can do these things a little bit out of order, and that's okay. And if you're only doing an ebook, of course, this is something that you can put on the back burner and worry about for next time. Software options for building your print book. Microsoft Word is the easiest one, and we're going to talk about how you can do that in some ways to make that easier on yourself in just a minute. That's what I did for my first book, which I'll go ahead and hold up. I went through, and this was all done in Word, and it turned out really, really well. All right, I've heard complaints, but not about the way it looks. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. What we have, Microsoft Word, those are just some of the options. Adobe InDesign has a high learning curve. I don't know it yet. I'd like to. It's also a little more expensive because it's a monthly fee. But if you have access to that for some reason, jump on it. Also, a lot of, especially I know Word, there's a discount for educators. There may be one of those for Adobe, I don't know, but it might be worth looking into, or looking for some of those coupons. The Mac options that you have, Linux. This is something online, is something that was not there just a few years ago, but it's there now and it's something you can use. Readsy is free and you're able to format your book on there and it actually looks pretty good. I haven't gone all the way through the process. I can't vouch for it 100%, but it's probably worth exploring if you're looking for something that's very much just plug it in and see how it looks. Pressbooks has something similar, but it's $100 for the print plus the ebook. I think it was, I can't remember what it was, 35. It was less than that for just the ebook, but for both it was $100. And that's something you do online and you just plug in your text and it does the formatting for you. Bookdesigntemplates.com is very similar to Pressbooks. I really liked the templates at bookdesigntemplates.com. They have an author series. They're very, very attractive looking books. So if you want to be able to do this for just a little bit cheaper than paying someone to do it for you, those are some options. For me personally, if I was going to pay $100, I would say, well, couldn't I save for a few more, save another couple of months and pay for, or break the piggy bank and go ahead and pay someone to do it for me for a fee, if that makes sense. Creating the PDF. When you upload to Amazon or the other print-on-demand publishers, what you're going to do is you need the PDF. And so whatever you make this in, that's going to be your final product. And Adobe Acrobat will make for me, I've found makes the best. Like at the ground level, they are the best in terms of the colors and things like that. But you can get away with any PDF creator. Let's keep going. Novel templates for Word. Like I said, Word, I was able to do this for myself. I took mine from DIYBookFormats.com and was able to make it my own by making it my own with fonts and formatting. It just gives the bare bones of it, and then you go in and you change it to be exactly how you want it to be. You have an immense amount of freedom. If you're not familiar with, this is just, for me, I figured this is, most of you are familiar with Word or something similar. So this is just, for me, the cheapest, easiest method if you want to DIY the interior of your book. There's, like I said, if you know InDesign or if you know some of these other things, you want to go with that. Because Word, it's tricky to get it to where it doesn't look like it was made in a word processor, but it's worth, if you're able to do it, this is where we're at. If you are familiar with Word, you understand sections. That's something I didn't really know about until I used these templates. It's sort of like doing a page break, but it's a section break. I'm going to include links in the notes that explain how to do sections and also how to best utilize styles to save yourself work. The nice thing about styles is if you change the style formatting, it'll change everywhere in your book. So you don't have to go through and do that page at a time. Let's keep going. The anatomy of a book. This is a little bit like a visit to the library when you're in the second grade. These are the parts of a book. But you're going to have to be intimately familiar with all these different things, and your book probably won't include half of these things. But for instance, a half title, every book you pick up has a half title except for mine. A half title is actually, you open up the book and it will have, let's see, I guess this one uses kind of but it'll have a page with just, often it'll just be the title, and then a few pages later it'll have the title with the author, maybe an image. I didn't know that, so, but no one has ever noticed. So if you mess this thing up, I didn't notice until I was going through this. I was like, why does my new book have this one page? Oh, because every book has a half title, except for mine. So that's another example of these are things that most people aren't going to notice, you're going to notice. But it's one of those things where if it is professional, it will look professional. They might not know what's wrong. You just want to get as many things as these right as you can. Anatomy of a page. These are some pages from from my latest book. It's going to be looking like this, but it's only filled with my rough draft, so I could get an idea of so I would have a prop. But these are pages I paid someone to have done. What you're going to look at is you're going to have to be so familiar with some of these things that were invisible, or most of the time they're very invisible. So your margins, one mistake that I often see is, well, what they'll do is they'll get their pages reversed. And I don't know why this is such a common problem. I think it has to do with the first page often being odds and evens. But what they'll do is you'll open up someone's book and they'll have very wide margins on the edges, and you won't be able to get to the middle words. So you want to make sure to be able to get your margins right. Yes?
You want to use mirror margins in Word.
You do want to use mirror margins. And these are things that are going to be in those templates I talked about, but if you're familiar with, if you're building it from the ground up, you're going to want to use mirror margins. Your left and right pages are going to be different. These are all things that you can work on with Word. And you can do it all inside Microsoft Word. Something I will say right now is when you're getting ready to do this, I would suggest we're all book people, so we probably have some books on hand, or you can go to Barnes & Noble, you go to the library, and just pick up some books that you think look nice. And you're going to say, what is it about this book that I like? And you can go through and you can look at how they handle things like the running heads and the margins and drop caps and things like that. With mine, you'll notice I commissioned to have a drop cap on each chapter, and I have like 1 million chapters. It's kind of a pain, but I think it looks really good. Another thing you're going to have is you're going to have they call them small caps. Once you start noticing these things, it'll be like Neo in the Matrix. You'll see all this stuff. Small caps, a lot of times the first line will be all capital letters, but the ones that would be capital are a little bit bigger. Small caps. These are all things you can do yourself, and it gives it that look of this is a finished book. So the right-handed page and the left-handed pages are going to be different. I looked at some common problems with self-published books, and that would be that the right-handed pages would be evenly numbered. The first page is always going to be on the right-hand side. So left, right, with the page numbers. That's just something you want to avoid.
The drop cap is the R.
Yeah, that's the R. Yeah, that's the drop cap, and then next to it, you can't really see it, is small caps. But this is just the way this was designed by someone else. Another way to do, something I've seen in a lot of books, very classy releases, instead of a drop cap, they do a raised cap, which just means they make the first letter kind of big, and maybe a different font. And that one is way easier to implement. But you can do drop caps in Word with the click of a button. So this doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be rocket science, but it's just little things you can do that you can tweak inside these templates to make it look good. I'll just skip down to this bottom one, widows and orphans. I will probably say these wrong because everyone has different definitions, but when I'm talking about it, a widow would be a line here at the bottom that is cut off from the rest of its paragraph, just a single line. And then an orphan would be the same, but at the top of the page. The saying for it is orphans have no past and widows have no future. So that's something you're going to have to care about if you do this. Because for me, when I go through most professionally published books, I'll see a lot of widows, which are the ones at the bottom of the one page, but you don't see any orphans because it just looks weird. All right, but at the same time, you still want nice and squared up pages. So there's going to be a lot of give and take. One thing that I did poorly on Monsters All the Way Down with justified text, a professionally laid out book where the typesetting has been done professionally, it will have split words, hyphenated words, where one word will be on the one line, the next one will be on the bottom. It will be invisible to your readers. For you, that word is your baby, all right, and you don't want to pull a King Solomon on that baby. But your readers are not going to notice. Okay, it's going to make your pages look nice and square. And the problem with justified text without hyphenization is that there'll be huge gaps sometimes. And people, I've never heard anyone complain with my first one, but they should have, because at times it does happen. So something to learn from my mistake. Choosing your font. I see a couple of people, some fellow font snobs. You don't want to use bad fonts. You want to keep it classic. You want to stick with for the text of the book, you want it to be a serif font. If you're familiar with fonts, a serif font has little things sticking out of the letters. This is a serif font. Like there's a little doohickey on the F and thing. Those are the serifs. When it comes to the actual text of your book, you want a serif font because it's easier to read and it looks really good. You want to stick with classic fonts. I will have some links to some nice lists. I personally love Garamond. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but I think that is a gorgeous font. Bookman Old Style is another popular one. Minion. There's all kinds of different fonts, and there are a lot of free options that you can use, or ones that come with Word or your program of choice. And you can match it to the material as well. You don't want it to look out of place. If you have a sci-fi story or a fantasy story, you want it to kind of look right with your book. Questions to ask when hiring a book designer. If you decide to go the route of hiring it out, these are just some things you want to be asking. Will I have a chance to request changes? Because you're probably going to screw something up. It'll be a month later, you'll have a typo. Will you be able to ask them to fix it? If not, can you have the editable file? Can I reuse the fonts and images? If they put images in there, is that something you're able to use, or is it trademarked with someone else? If something needs fixed later, are you available? I already covered that. All right, so that's for the print book itself. I think I covered most of the things I need to do with that. We're going to move on to cover, because I think cover design is one of the most fun parts of actually getting the book out, because it just looks so cool to have a real cover on your book. Now, I've said before I have the, sorry, my brain's starting to trail in the second hour. Okay, if I fall over, just prop me up. Put this back in my hand. Okay, so I do a mailing list, and every month I put out a free short story, and it's formatted for Mobi, it's formatted for EPUB, it's formatted for Kindle, and you can download it and put it on. It's sort of just an exercise and something I do to desperately try and get people to sign up for my newsletter. But these are just some of the covers that I've made as I've gone. The colors don't quite match, so if that bothers you, say, oh, I bet the colors look really good, except on that screen. But these are ones I've made myself to show that I like to play with Photoshop, and I kind of have an idea of how to do that. But it's nothing compared to the covers that I've hired other people to make. These are both done by a guy named Rory Harnden from the Netherlands. I found him through Reddit, which is a website I waste too much time on. But he had done free covers for a lot of ebook users, and he said, if you'd like to hire me, these are what I've made. And I got in contact with him, and I've been thrilled. And I get a lot more compliments on the covers than I get on the writing. So that's maybe about equal, I don't know. Unless you're a graphic designer, you want to hire out your cover. And why? Don't judge a book by its cover. We've all heard that. Mm-hmm. We have to say that because everybody does it. In fact, there are contests where that's literally what they do. They just judge the covers. So that's going to be your public face, not just for your book, but for you and hopefully for a career. Graphic design software is expensive. We talked earlier with Adobe. If you want to do InDesign, something like that, that's serious, real artistic programs, they cost, Adobe Suite is $50 a month. So for me, that's not worth it because I only needed one. Hopefully, I'll be using it 2 or 3 times. It would be 3 or 4 times a year. But even then, $50 a month is a lot. For people who work in graphic design, that's just going to be part of what they do business with. So they're going to have that on hand. Proper composition is harder than it looks. I showed off my little covers. The composition on them is not very good. My dad's an artist. I know what good art is. Mine is not. That takes all that time, you've spent in dark rooms typing away and learning your craft. That's what artists have been doing. They've been honing their craft. You want that talent and the skill that they developed over a period of time. And they'll also know a stupid idea when they hear it. I remember a couple of times I'd say, how about this? No, that would never work. Things you need to know. These are when you hand off to your cover designer, you're going to need the number of pages for the template. Here's the template from CreateSpace. It's super duper simple. All you need to know is the page number and how big your book is. When you're trying to decide how big your book is, that's a good thing to do with going and looking at these books you like the look of and the books in your genre. These books are 5.25 by 8. And that seemed to be the most general size for these trade paperback. So that's generally what these are called as opposed to a hardcover. Now, you'll need to know if you want a matte or gloss cover. I am a huge proponent of matte covers. I think they look gorgeous. But for instance, here is a bestseller that was done with a gloss cover. It can also look really good. So the difference is matte is a nice flat. Gloss is nice and shiny. And that's one of the major decisions you'll need to make when you're contacting your cover. Yes.
Both my sons are graphic designers, and both of them said if you go with matte if you're going to be taking pictures a lot, because
That makes sense.
it takes pictures without reflecting and things like that. But certain genres have glossy, and
Have glossy.
if you're going to be in that genre, don't worry about it.
That's
Just
very
go
true.
with
Does
gloss.
Chicklet usually have glossy covers? Or-
It's changing. It used to be only glossy, and
Okay.
now it's a little. There's both.
So you'll want to know what's current in your genre when making this
Yes.
choice. And that'll be one of the things you have to do as you upload this information later. But I would think your graphic designer is going to want to know whether, just for their choices, they're going to want to know which one you're going to use, matte or glossy.
Yes.
The genre and motif, symbols, tone, that kind of information. I don't think any cover designer reads the book. Even at the tip top, I'm pretty sure they know. And the people who make like movie posters, I don't think they even watch the movie. You know what I mean? I think this is all. It's like it's
Concept.
fallen from my. It's just the concepts. I've read a lot of things on why the cover artist doesn't want to. The writer of the book, you probably want every single cool thing in the book on the cover. You don't want to cram that all in. You want to give them some things to work with. You want to make clear on the deadline. That's with any of these things. You just want to be clear up front when you need it done. And if they can't do it, they'll let you know, and you can find someone else. Otherwise, you'll say, well, I'll adjust some things. You want to have an artist photo on hand. This isn't something I've talked about a lot. I know I've talked a lot about, spending and finding money. An artist photo is one of those things. You know that friend you have who's obsessed with their camera, and they know how to do color balancing and things like that. This is a time you can say, would you like to? This is something you can say. Would you help me out with this? I'll be happy to pay you. I'll be happy to you put this on. Maybe you'll be lucky like me and they'll do it for free. But you can take them to lunch. But this is one of those things where it's a small thing, but you want it to look nice. You can get it done professionally, of course, and it won't be that expensive. But you want to make sure that you have your artist photo, or author photo, because you're going to be using it for a lot of things. Publisher name and logo, if applicable, that you give that to them. They'll put that on your cover. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, on color,
Yes.
some publishers use CMYK, most do.
Right. Yeah.
And RGB does not necessarily transfer the way you want it to
That's an
CMYK.
excellent point. That's an excellent point.
Lost in translation, one come out, don't affect the other.
That's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that. Like I've said, I'm not a graphic designer, so I'm not, if I miss one of these things, important details. If you're working with a cover artist, they'll have some experience with how these things will look in general. You'll also, when you order your proof, you'll have some idea of how it's going to look when you're finally done. Speaking of the sweet spot, you want experienced but affordable. You don't want someone that's experienced but out of your price range, and you don't want someone who's cheap but terrible. So you want that sweet spot. Affordable, experienced, okay? And the reason is you don't want to be their first cover if you can help it, because they'll know things like which colors will transfer and look good. They'll also be more dependable, and I found this to be true with illustrators as well. My second novel, I hired 8 illustrators to do artwork for it, to go inside the book, and it's an incredible experience. I'm really thrilled I got to do it. It taught me a lot about working with artists, and artists are a lot like writers. And so you know what that's like. So what you're going to be doing, and what I did find to be true though, I had one of my artists was kind of an industry veteran in the comic book world. She had all of these things going on in her life at the time. She said, "Oh, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to get it done." She had hers done months before anyone else did, because she was the experienced one, and that came through. I was thrilled with the work I got from everyone, but the experienced people are the easiest to work with because they're the most dependable. You want to be helping them through the process. You want them to help you through the process, especially on the covers. not the other way around. You don't want to have to be leading them by the hand on these things. And part of that is finding someone who's experienced. Cover art versus cover design. This is something really, there are two different skill sets. You can be an incredibly gifted artist. I know I spoke to someone earlier who's an artist, but they don't do a lot of design work. And so you can work with two different people. For Four Color Bleed, I hired an artist named Adam Prosser, and he did the illustration. And then for my beta readers, I did this monstrosity on the far right. It doesn't translate as well on this small screen, but my wife said, when looking at it, she said it made her physically ill. It gave her vertigo. Well, that's something, it's kind of hard to do that. The military could probably find some applications. Because I'll tell you what, she did not like that. But that's the kind of thing I thought, that's everything I want it to be. But I knew that it was not going to be the final cover. And when I sent it off to Rory, he took it and he did something totally different than what I expected, but it was perfect. If you only can get one, go for a designer all the way, because for this other book I've got, well, I'll show some pictures of it in just a minute. But a designer is going to be able to work with stock images, things like that, and is going to be able to create you a cover, where if you only have a cover artist, you'll lack the final product that you really need. Common mistakes with covers. This one, the top one is the one I see all the time, and that is low resolution images. It has to be at least 300 dpi. It doesn't hurt to have more, because you'll also maybe want to put it, I took my cover and put it on a canvas. It's very cheap to do that online, but and that was like 600 dpi, so that when it was big, it still looked good. Missing information. Typically books will have a place for the genre and things like that on the back, so you want to make sure that you don't have anything missing. You don't want to be too busy or cluttered, because part of that is you want it to look good in the thumbnail, as I mentioned at the bottom. Poor font choices. One of the things, not being a graphic designer, I don't have that eye for fonts that I wish I did. I can kind of see what looks cool, but I can't go out. And they also will have resources that they know are good. They'll have a list of good fonts to use for you. Have any of you ever seen that lady who's on every single billboard? Do you know what I'm talking about? She's on the eye billboard. She's on the lose weight billboard. That's stock photography that gets overused, and you don't want that to be a mistake you make on your book. Some questions to ask your cover artist. What will you need from me? Will you use free fonts? Will it be something I can reuse inside the interior of the book, maybe, in the running heads? Do you provide concepts or thumbnails? How would you like to be credited? Do you work hourly or standard cost? A lot of times, I found, just in my very small sphere, I found that artists that are doing illustrations, they generally work on a set price. I'll do this piece of artwork for this amount of money. But a graphic designer will work hourly. And this, of course, isn't universal. You'll find a lot of cover designers that will do it for a lump sum. But I found that it works out pretty well monetarily, because they're able to do these things much faster than you would expect. You're paying for their experience as much as you're paying for their time. Are you available for corrections? Both covers I've done, I've had to go back and say, can you change this thing? I have an updated back cover text. Can I have the file in editable format? I've received mine in InDesign files. That's useless to me. I don't know what to do with it. But if for some reason I couldn't get a correction made by my cover artist, I could give that file to another graphic designer and they could take up where they left off. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. The process, you gather everything you need together, search high and low for the right designer, initiate contact, but don't come on too strong. You don't want to scare them off. I actually mean this. When you contact them first off, you don't say, I want you to do my cover, here's all my concepts, here's all these things. You don't want to dump all that on them at once. Contact them, say, hey, are you available to do covers? This is what I'd like to do. And they'll ask for what they need. Come to an agreement. You'll give them something to work with. I'll show what I've done in the past, review concepts, test your thumbnails, and we'll look at that in just a minute. And pull that trigger and say, it's finished, it's beautiful. This is what I did the first time I did a cover. I found all these kind of just different things that kind of had a little bit to do with the book. I found these are just Google images. I'm really sorry for the copyright. I have sources for all of them if you need them later. But he was able to take that and make a cover for me that I think looks really great. And he was able to take those. He's never read a word of my work as far as I know. So, but he's able to make something because you give them some ideas of the tone and you give them some motifs and symbols, and they'll run with it. He originally gave me, these are just some concepts that he made, really rough concepts. You'll notice that I went with the second one, but I loved the third one. I thought it looked really striking. But it looked terrible as a thumbnail. It did not work as a thumbnail. So I said, can you put the slime on the back? He said, yeah, I'll put the slime on the back. So that's my contribution. The slime is on the back of the cover. Here I am. All right, so, but it's nice when they send you some multiple options of what you would like to see. It lets you get to choose. Not everyone's going to do that, and it's not always necessary. I don't think he did this for me for the second book, but it was nice to kind of have an idea of what might look good. This is just an example that I threw together in 3 minutes of how to test your thumbnails. The cover of your book is going to be the first thing people see. Is going to be what attracts them to your book initially, and we're talking about publishing on Amazon. So go grab a screen, print the screen, do a screen capture of Amazon's page, and then take your book cover, shrink it down, and just stick it on there. I did that in Paint, and that gave me an idea. Will that be visible? And it is. It's a face. It's a comic. It's kind of neat looking. It's vintage. That's what I was hoping to see in the thumbnail. So that's what you want to do to test your thumbnails out.
And make sure it's in your genre so that you're competing with other books that are going to be
exactly.
Yes.
One of my problems with my second book is it's different than everybody else's, so I wasn't sure, but I was happy with what it did. I'm kind of taking a risk with it, but I know it looks good teeny tiny. And as I said earlier, I loved this spot, but when it shrank down, it just was a muddy mess. So that's something to keep in mind. That thumbnail is much more important than we probably usually would consider. If you do decide to go it alone, some of you are talented graphic designers, or you would just, this is not where you're able to spend the money, especially with other costs associated, or if you're trying to go it completely DIY. There are Creative Commons and public domain images. I've added to the notes that I'll be emailing out a few of the better stock photography websites I found. They're completely free. Ditto for fonts. There's always going to be a free font that is going to suit what you want to do with it. Use templates like those from Canva or DIY book covers. I heard some people talking about using Canva for different things. That's an online image editor that has really easy to use templates. Yes.
But you have to watch out because some of them are only, you can only use it for free up to 10,000 copies.
Yes, you always need to do the license.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, that's one reason I mentioned with Creative Commons and public domain images, because with Canva, you can upload your own images. So if you have something that does not have a copyright on it, it's going to be something you're able to use more often. So anytime you can get it free of copyright, or if it's a photograph you take yourself, things like that, that's where you want to be. You want something that you can use as many times as you want. Free editing software, these are just, CreateSpace has a cover creator. I haven't used it myself. Some people are very happy with it. Canva, as I mentioned, it's free with paid options. Pixlr is free, GIMP. Those are Photoshop clones that are kind of, that you can use for free and make work. Inkscape is what I use to make the logo for my, it looks good teeny tiny, and that's all I'm worried about right now. But that makes vector graphics, and if you're familiar at all, vector graphics are graphics that look exactly the same no matter how big or small they are. So that's something that you can make use of. What to know when you're uploading to CreateSpace, because that's where we're at. If we finished our cover, we finished our interior, now we're ready to upload. These are the things you'll need to know. Most of it's very simple, obvious stuff like you're going to need to know the book title, subtitle, series title, who contributed. You'll need your ISBN at this point. It'll also be in the interior on a copyright page, so you'll already have that. You'll want to know the dimensions, and we talked about how you can look for that.
Right.
Yes.
CreateSpace will provide you with an ISBN if you don't have one.
Yes, and we did mention, if you do not want to pay, like I said, it's a little pricey. I totally understand. You can get a free ISBN from CreateSpace. It will list CreateSpace or Amazon, I can't remember, I think it's CreateSpace, as the publisher. So if that's when you're trying to, it's one more thing to look professional on, but I totally understand, especially if it's your first one, if you'd like, if that money can be better spent on editing or cover design, I understand. You'll want to know, like I said, whether you're going with a matte or gloss finish. You'll need your description, which hopefully is already on the back of your book, but you'll want to decide which description you want to use specifically on the Amazon page when you're selling the book. You can also go back and edit that, so some of these things can be changed. You'll need to know the book category, 5 search keywords. This is something that's important. I say don't say it has adult content. Well, if it does, you'll want to say it does. But there'll be a little checkbox that says, does your book have adult content? Unless your book is erotica, don't say it has adult content. My books have some violence in them. They have some adult situations, but that's R-rated. If you say it has adult content, that's like NC-17. Does that make sense? There are people you will miss out on if you say that you have adult content that are not going to be, that it's not what it's intended for. Distribution options and pricing. There are many distribution options inside Amazon. One thing we talked about a little bit earlier, do I do this on the next one? Yes. CreateSpace is going to be for print, KDP is for digital. Some people say to use Ingram Spark for expanded distribution. You can use Amazon for expanded distribution, but you get a much smaller royalty than you would like. You get a higher royalty if you go with Ingram Spark on that. Ingram Spark is its whole thing. I don't know it as well as I'd like. It's something I'm looking to expand to, but that's something to keep in mind for the future. The nice thing about this is you can always change your distribution channels. So this isn't set in stone. Your keywords, your distribution channels, your description, these are all things you can go back and change. So don't panic. And a lot of people fiddle with them constantly to try and get higher rankings. This is something that's very recent, as in this year recent, KDP paperback. KDP, as I say up here, that's for the digital book on Amazon. But now they have a paperback option that's with KDP, so it's all in one place. I really think eventually that's going to be the only option, so it's all in one spot. But for right now, CreateSpace is still your better option for print because you can order books at cost and get proof copies. And you can't do that, as far as I know when I checked yesterday, you can't do that through KDP paperback. So that's just something to keep in mind, but it's probably where we're going. Amazon's probably going to consolidate eventually. It also had some minor bugs I saw people complain about, but if you're using CreateSpace, you're going to find out everything has some minor bugs. So, ebook formatting. Let me check and make sure I'm doing okay. Okay, I will go through this pretty quick. We got plenty of time. All right, ebook formatting. Estimated costs, as we've already said, print and ebook, you'll often do those together. I can see that you might be able to hire someone to do one and the other, but I think you're going to want that continuity of if you do hire someone, to go ahead and do both. How is it different than print? This is really interesting to me. You've got, with the print copy, the PDF is going to look the same to absolutely everybody. But with the digital book, that person can choose the size of the font, they can choose which font they read in. That's all variable. So things like widows and orphans, you're not going to have to care about that. You're not going to have to care about whether or not to hyphenate words because all of that is up to the user's controlled experience. So that's another double-edged sword. You are free in some ways, but at the other side of it, you don't know exactly what they're going to get all the time. So it's something you have to work on, but we'll talk about how you can have a better idea. Font size and type are fixed, must work on a variety of devices. Amazon, there are like at least 10 different Kindles, probably way more than that. Some are in color, some are in black and white, some use e-ink, some use LEDs, some use higher definition screens. But we'll talk about that. You also get less what you see is what you get. And the knowledge base, this was very frustrating to me when I was building an ebook. The knowledge base is very just spread out all over the internet. In fact, when I went back to find some of my favorite links in my bookmarks folder, oh, that was a great thing on ebooks, I'll share that. I went and clicked on it, the website's just gone. Or I found a really good book and I click on the link. The book is no longer available because this stuff, sometimes, in some ways, it's constantly changing. But mostly it's just the nature of the internet. It's constantly changing and evolving, so the knowledge base is a little hard to find. I will include a link to the CreateSpace forums. That's one of the best possible places because whatever problem you've had, a dozen people have already asked about it, and people are on there that are helping people. You can also contact their support to get some help. We had, I know Natalie asked earlier about the different book formats. These are the basic ones you need to know. Mobi is for Kindle, so that's what we're going to talk about. EPUB is everything else. In the middle, you've got IBA, which is iBooks. You don't have to worry about that one unless you're specifically working to the Apple Store, because you can use an EPUB for iBooks. But that's just another one. The weird little thing, though, is that a Mobi is actually just an EPUB file that's kind of, in many ways, it's just an EPUB file. But they've simplified it, and there's so that they can control the user experience a little bit more. So technically, what I'm going to be talking about, we're actually going to be creating EPUBs to turn into Mobis.
There's a slight difference between EPUB and Mobi when it comes to tables.
Oh, okay.
A Mobi will take a short table. I have a book that's like 99% tables. And I was able to break it up into many, many, many smaller tables and publish it on
Kindle, but I cannot publish that book on EPUB because EPUB cannot do tape.
Okay, I did not know that, because usually I think of Mobi as being a limited EPUB. But see, there's an example. This is why you're gonna have to be doing different versions. That's good to know. Let's go to the next one. The basic building blocks of an EPUB and a Mobi file are HTML and CSS. You may not need to ever know this, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea. HTML is what they build web pages out of. I tried to find a good metaphor for what CSS is, but mostly I just found people complaining about CSS and venting in the form of very colorful metaphors. But for me, it's a little bit like teaching a man to fish. When you're doing HTML, you can write and you can make it you can force it to do everything you want. But if you do CSS, it'll be a separate file, and you'll write your code in HTML, and then you'll tell it to you'll just point it to the CSS to decide what to do. And the bonus for that is if you change the CSS, it'll be just like the styles back in Word. You change the CSS and it'll change throughout the book without having to fix it every single time. So those are the basic things that you're going to be learning to do. Free options and paid options for creating an ebook if you decide to go it your own way. You can just do straight HTML and CSS. A lot of people who professionally make ebooks will do it that way because it's the cleanest way to get started. Pandoc is a way to get your HTML into an EPUB. Sigil is a very important tool that I found for editing an EPUB and tweaking it when I've made it in another program. EPUB check will go through and test for errors and see if you got the right things going. iBooks Author, I took a look at that. It made me wish I was an Apple guy, because iBooks Author will create an IBA or an EPUB, and it looks like it's very easy to work with, and it's a free program. So if you are already on a Mac, definitely check into that. I haven't published a book that way myself, but it looks like a very low barrier of entry for making a book. Kindle Gen is going to be a tool you'll probably be using, whether you know it or not, because it's also included in Kindle Previewer. Kindle Previewer is going to be a tool you want to download. It's free. It lets you see what your book will look like on different Kindle devices. It will also automatically, using Kindle Gen, take an EPUB and turn it into a Mobi file so it can work on Mobi devices. Calibre will also let you do an EPUB to Mobi, but I don't know. I wouldn't trust it as much as I would the Kindle one.
I've used it, and one thing that's really nice about it is you can do basically a one-click thing to change it, and I can send Mobis to my beta readers.
Yes.
That they can carry them with them on their Kindle.
Exactly.
Before it's even published.
Exactly. That's how I did it with my beta readers. Is I made a Mobi file for them.
Yeah.
And you can do that with the Kindle Previewer. And I really should clarify, with the Kindle Previewer, it has where you can look at what it would look like on a Kindle Fire, a Kindle Paperwhite, a first generation Kindle, so you don't have to buy 15 Kindles on eBay to try and figure out how to look on everything. And you'll be surprised what a difference some things make with image sizes and things like that. So, paid options. When I make my little short story ebooks, I use Scrivener. It's very easy for me to use. It's not for everybody. It's about $40, but you can often get a coupon. I know about that coupon.
Yeah.
Get it for about $25, $35. I can't remember, but it's really neat, and it does some cool things. If you're an author, you might just look into it because it gives you some fun ways to organize your information. Juto is a lot like Scrivener. Pressbooks and book design templates, I've already mentioned them. They're very much just plug in your text and it will generate your ebook for you. And of course, InDesign, if you designed your book in InDesign, there are scripts that you can run to take your print book and turn it into an EPUB. So if you're familiar with InDesign, that's one less program you'll have to use. Helpful guidelines. I made it so hard on myself when I made my Monsters All the Way Down ebook. You want to keep it simple, because simple is always going to be elegant. Minimalism is not a bad thing because the user controls so much of what they see. There's a little less pressure. Don't bite off more than you can chew, and don't drive yourself crazy. I had these drop caps that I wanted to put in, drop caps and small caps and all these things. I wanted all of them in the ebook. It was a huge amount of work, and it took me a lot of time. And since I was doing it myself, I wish I would have known that would be something might have been worth hiring out. Use pre-sized high-resolution images. You still want images that are really high resolution, but you don't want them too big because they'll look weird on different devices. And it'll also look weird on your preview on Amazon. I had these drop caps that I thought looked really great in the book, and they looked fine on every Kindle device. But on the Kindle preview, they filled the page. So I had to go back and shrink them all. And if you make them pre-sized, it also will prevent distortion. Check through the entire file before uploading. Of course, you're going to want to do that. You'll also be able to preview it, I think, once it's online. And be sure to check out the preview on Amazon. As I said, it's not always what you expect it to be. The guy I'm working with right now, he says a lot of that stuff is undocumented. So even though he's making a professional book, he isn't always able to know for sure what it's going to look like in the previewer. And no one, that's the way it is for everybody. So be sure to check. Questions to ask, which formats will I get? You want to get at least the EPUB for everywhere else and the Mobi for Amazon. If something needs fixed, are you available? What will it cost? And then also, this isn't as much, if you have the EPUB, you can take an EPUB apart with Sigil and other programs. So if you need to, you can go to someone else. But it's really nice if you can go to them to have it fixed. What you need to know when uploading a KDP, a lot of it's the same information, except you have a few more keywords and categories. It also asks a grade range. So if you're writing a children's book, we had someone mention, when will it be released? You are not able to do pre-orders on CreateSpace, but you can do pre-orders through Kindle. So that's something to keep in mind. And will you use KDP Select? That's something that's a big debate for a lot of authors. When your KDP Select means that you will only sell the digital book through Amazon. It'll be an exclusive.
For 90
days.
Well, you can do it in 90-day increments.
Yeah.
As long as you're with KDP Select, it's an exclusive, from what I understand. But the nice thing is you can opt in, you can opt out, but after 90 days have passed, you have the option to do different promotions. I had thousands of people download my book when I did a KDP Select thing that wouldn't have otherwise downloaded. I did get some reviews out of it. I didn't see that huge bump I was hoping for, but like I said, I'm learning marketing as I go on. I'm always going to be here when we talk about marketing. I know that we concentrated mostly on novels, and I apologize for that. I know that's what a lot of us are doing. I know we have people who have published nonfiction, and we have some children's books things. Most of this is still going to apply in the abstract. If my experience with hiring illustrators has been very, very positive. I do know that most people recommend that when you're self-publishing, that rather than to try and work out some kind of royalty deal or something like that, you're probably best off if you're hiring an illustrator to pay them up front for their work, because they're worth, they deserve their payment. And you don't want to be kicking yourself later. And also just legally, it's much simpler because the money's going to be coming through you and everything like that. You've been able, James, you've said that when you've done formatting, you're able to do that in Word, and it usually works fine, but sometimes doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, the only difference I have, when I make a print book, it's already pre-formatted to change it to EPUB or ebook easily. You just strip out the headers, the page numbers, and I print my print books in 6x9.
Right.
For the EPUB, you just want to make a continuous section. You want to make it 8.5 by 11. You want to take out the headers, the footers, and everything else. You don't have to change anything else. Yes. Unless you have lots of footnotes, and you have to decide what you want to do with the footnotes or endnotes.
Yes.
But KDP will take all your footnotes and make them endnotes or just leave them endnotes.
See, and that's great. I haven't had as much experience with that. I do know you can take a Word file and just upload. You can upload that to KDP directly.
Do everything.
And I should have paid more attention to that. That's a free option. You have to go back through and look at it afterward, because I know a lot of people have font sizes and other problems like that sneak in, especially when you're dealing with a lot of complex formatting like for a nonfiction book. For children's books, I have not had the pleasure yet. I would love to do it soon in the future of doing one of those through Amazon or just self-publishing in general, because I'm working on winding my distribution options as well. But it's very similar. You will be doing color printing, most likely, and those things I just learned from from Kirk in the back. He showed me his, and it did not add a lot to the cost, which I was surprised. I would have thought it would be twice as much. One thing I did forget to mention also with Kirk, I'm sorry, he mentioned to me earlier a nice little hint for when you create your cover. The spine will often not be lined up. So you don't want your spine to be like have lines on it or separated colors. You want it all kind of blend seamlessly. And that was really good advice that I wouldn't have thought of myself. So when you're building your covers, be sure to take that into account.
Speaking of spines, for anybody who creates something that's very thin in a book, like particularly a children's book, make sure that on the spine that you can print the name and the information on it, you know, your name and your
Yes.
title and stuff. Because if you don't, you cannot get it on places like Barnes and Noble. They won't put it on a shelf without a name on the spine.
Yes, Kirk also mentioned there's a minimum number of pages. Yes.
Well, I understand Barnes and Noble won't take print on the damn books anyway. Period.
Well,
They have in the past, but you have to be able to, their thing on that is it has to be something that they can also reimburse if the books are not sold. So it has to be.
you're probably working on a store-by-store basis
Yeah,
with a lot of
my
these
book
bookstores.
is, gotten out on that, and it was on demand, so.
In the stores.
You can also get in, with the EPUBs, you can also get through their, do they even do that anymore? I thought it was on the way out. Do they still have their digital distribution? I won't talk
think
about it
so.
because I don't really know.
I think they still do, but I think it's limited. It depends on what.
But you're able to get in there. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. The version of Word and Publisher, does it matter when you're working with any of these on the web?
Most of the time, I think not. It's usually pretty straightforward. Some of the templates it may affect. If you download a template, it'll tell you if it'll work with your version of Word. I think I did mention that if you have access, if you're an educator or you have an educator in your family, you can get a really good discount on Word. So it's pretty affordable to get the upgraded version. But if you're working with an older version of Word, you can still do all of these things. I would say your templates may or may not work.
Okay, so template would be, because I'm working with 2002.
Yeah, well, in,
Templates could probably be.
templates will probably work. And if they don't, you could probably find a template that would work with your version of Windows.
Oh,
Yeah, so just keep looking and do those things. But I can't vouch for that for sure. But yes, ma'am, Vicki.
Does anybody know how thick the book has to be in order for the title to print on the spine?
I had somebody asking. Did you happen to
Can't remember
know?
the number, I think it's 120 words, 120 pages.
There's no children's book and there's going to be able to self-publish inclusive title on the spine.
Right.
This,
yeah.
this is affected by the type of page you have, glossy or matte, and it's, that changes it.
It'll also change the thickness if you're doing glossy pages. Yeah, some of that will affect it as well. So I'm sorry I don't have the exact answer on that. We can look into it and yes, ma'am.
A couple of other things. On the distribution,
Yes.
the problem with distribution through CreateSpace, from my perspective,
Yes.
is that they will not take returns. And that means that
Yes.
the brick and mortar stores will not order from them. So you really
Yes.
need another option like Ingram
Ingram
Smart.
Spark. And like, yeah, exactly.
And I wanted to mention a website or a site that I used for my book cover because it
Oh,
was
please do,
simple.
yeah.
It was simple and it was cheap.
What was that called?
It's called selfpubbookcovers.com. And I looked
Selfpubbookcovers.com.
on it the other day for the one I'm writing, and they've grown a lot. They have 535 pages with, I don't know, about 12 covers per page.
Okay, great.
So if you
Yeah.
can find one that works on there.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can customize it and they give you recommendations. I sent mine in and the guy in charge called me and said, I can do this better for you. And he did. He fixed.
That's
He
fantastic,
fixed
yeah.
it. And I was getting my dad's done. He was
Yes.
101 years old. I said, I need this done fast because I want him to see it.
Yeah, of
And,
course.
and he did. I mean, he rushed it through.
Thank you
So-
so much for sharing that. So selfpubcovers.com.
Yeah.
One of the problems when you're doing a search, say it one more time.
Self-bookcovers.com.
Self-pub book covers. When you're searching for things like self-published book covers, you get a lot of nonsense that isn't helpful. But that one sounds like one that is definitely worth going, especially if they have that good of customer service. Yes, ma'am.
Damaged books, whenever you're the publisher,
Right.
how do you deal with that?
Well, I know that some people have received Create spaces, we'll clarify, print on demand means every time, they only print the books they need to send to you. So that means that there's a bit of a speediness to it. And Kirk showed me how in every book he has, there'll be a little bit of differences sometimes. It's not exactly perfect, but no one is going to notice most of the time. But I have heard of people dealing with Create Space receiving damaged books. You contact them and they will make it good. It's just like any other dealing with customer service. Yes, sir.
There's one service that we encountered that will produce like 5 books for you. I mean, just you
Okay,
pay a low
right.
fee, and here comes 5 books. Have you ever seen that?
I have seen some things like that. There are people who will do every step of this for you that I've talked about today. They'll get you from start to finish. The thing with when you're dealing with only like 5 books, you can go through Amazon or Ingram Spark, which is also Lightning Source. If you go through those, you can create as many as you want. So this thing where they only make like 5, it may be a service that you need at one point in time. I would say go ahead and do it in a way that's going to be infinitely recreatable.
Yeah.
But that's personally for me. It'll also depend if the quality of the books is also going to come into account. Yes, ma'am.
Like last year, sometime I ended up on Book Baby's email
Okay.
list, and I'm interested, but I don't have time, and I just wonder if anybody else has experience with Book Baby and what that experience was.
I have
Was
not.
that a good side, a bad side?
They do have free book templates, which I listed. So they do have resources that you can use. I don't know if their service, I don't know the quality of the service they provide. One of the things that I've noticed is there are a lot of sites that will take and go through these processes for you. I don't know if the quality you'll get for your money because you're not dealing with each step of the way.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear from someone who's done that. So if you will get with her afterward and let her know if you have had that experience. I don't want to go long, so are there any other questions that I can help you with? Yes, ma'am.
What about publishing overseas, like sending books overseas and stuff? Because I know that there are some overseas things to where that they can actually copy your book and not give you.
I wouldn't worry about if you're getting pirated. That's a great. There's a lot of different ideas on this. If someone cares about your work enough to pirate it, you must be doing pretty well, and that's going to be another stage on the journey. But here's the nice thing. One nice thing with Amazon is you don't have to worry about shipping overseas. They have printers around the world that will do the shipping for you. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up since we already have people leaving. Thank you so much for letting me come and share with you. This has made my day. I know Janet's going to come out, make my month here. Janet's going to come up and do.
Well, actually, I just wanted to tell everybody, since after this meeting is the